A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Hope that you had a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, getting ready to welcome in the new year. It is good to be back, and we've got a busy show for you. In fact, we've got a lengthy conversation coming up in just mere moments with Tim Anderson, who is an attorney in Virginia, and he has been getting a lot of views for his Facebook videos talking about the Second Amendment sanctuary movement in Virginia, as well as the impending gun control legislation. Sat down to talk with Tim about this. It turned into a really broad and interesting conversation, and I want you to take a look and a listen to what Tim Anderson has to say about what is coming in 2020 for Virginia gun owners. Tim, thanks so much for coming on the program, sir. It's great talking with you today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You have been all over the place, and I've been hearing your name even before you and I had the chance to connect. I was actually in Buckingham County for the Second Amendment Sanctuary meeting, and the woman who was sitting next to me shared one of your videos from Facebook with me and said, have you heard this guy? And since then, I got to tell you, I've heard a lot of people talking about your videos and what you're saying about the Second Amendment sanctuary movement. So I've got to ask, first of all, what inspired you to get so active in this movement in Virginia?
Well, so as an attorney, I've had this Facebook page for a long time, and I've made multiple videos about the law over my career. And, I do Second Amendment work in the context of felon restoration mostly. I'll do a video about how to get your rights restored if you were, a felon, or maybe if you were involuntarily put in a mental hospital or something like that. And I do bankruptcy work, and we do other things. So we've been doing these videos. When the Democrats won in November, I said, you know what, I'm going to start paying attention to state government and watching how these bills are posting. And then when I decided to do that, I saw, the first wave of bills come in, most importantly, like Senate Bill 16. And I thought, oh my goodness, I need to talk about this. Now, at the time, I only had about maybe 10 or 12,000 people that were subscribed to my page. So it wasn't a huge number, a good amount, but not a huge number. So I said, I'm just going to start talking to these people who know me and they trust me and they've been with me for a long time, and ask them to start sharing the videos. And it didn't take too long until where we are now, where we have like 1.1 million people connected to the page. It went from 10 or 12,000 people to over 1 million in about a month. And I think that the reason for that is, and there's lots of people talking about these issues, but I think the reason that my videos are more popular, maybe, or have caught more fire, is that I'm not trying to take a side. I'm not trying to be on the Second Amendment side all the time. I'm not trying to be on the left side all the time. I'm literally just saying, here's the bills. Let me dissect them for you. Now you make a decision. You decide how you want to interact with your delegates and your senators. And I have always, every time, the entire purpose of this is just to educate the people watching so that they can, rather than just yell at their delegate about hating gun laws, they can say, hey, look, Senate Bill 16 says this, 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 and this, and I disagree with that. And that way they can have a more informed conversation with their elected officials. And so far, we have seen the groundswell, and I'm not taking credit for anything, but we've seen, the Commonwealth of Virginia, 100 plus jurisdictions have declared the sanctuaries. We've seen Senator Saslaw come out publicly and say he never intended on Senate Bill 16 becoming law, after 100 jurisdictions, swelled up.
Right.
We see Governor Northam saying, oh, yeah, of course we weren't going to make, we're going to always have a grandfather clause. And, whether we agree with that or not is another thing. But none of that was going to happen unless people started speaking up. And that's happened. And that's been really cool to watch. And I've had a front row seat to that. Not taking any or all of the credit for it, but I've had a front row seat to it, and it's really neat. And every one of my videos that I make, I'm like, if you don't like this, here's the delegate to write to. If you don't like this, here's the senator to write to. And I suspect that these senators and delegates probably get thousands of emails, once we publish. It's cool.
It is really cool. And that's, it's On one hand, it's sad that it has taken this to generate this grassroots response, I think, in defense of our constitutional rights. But on the other hand, as you say, it's been amazing to watch. It's been amazing to be a part of. I think that I've been to 10 different county commission meetings or county supervisor meetings over since the election began, and I've watched these crowds grow. From I was in Amelia County the first night that hundreds of people showed up just to ask their county supervisors to have a vote, and then I was there for the meeting where there were like 800 people packed into the high school as the supervisors actually cast their vote a month later, and to watch this phenomenon just continue to take shape. It's really incredible. And I think the important thing to remember is we're still in the very early stages here. Yes, we've sort of had these Second Amendment sanctuary votes, but the legislative session has not yet begun. And we really have, I think, a lot more chapters left to write in this story of how Virginians are standing up for their Second Amendment rights.
You're so right about that. And one of the really cool things about the movement has been this, is that you can pre-file a bill before the session starts on January 13th as a delegate or senator. And these delegates and senators were filing these pre-filed bills, about guns. And then once the backlash started happening, they're not doing it anymore. Yeah. There's not been a demonstratively decent Democrat bill that's been proposed for a couple weeks now. Now, here's an interesting thing. A Republican filed a bill last week on Friday that basically said it was, in order to purchase a firearm, you had to demonstrate firearm competency, similar to how a concealed carry permit operate. I think it was House Bill 152. And on Friday night, I did a video about this, and I said, this is what he's saying. I'm very surprised to see a Republican say this, but this is what he's saying. And by Saturday morning, he retracted the bill. He said, I've overwhelmingly heard from the people of Virginia, and I'm retracting the bill. It was only my intention to try to make it safer. I wasn't trying to restrict rights and all of that. So, so we're seeing that, we're seeing that happen. And what's even more cool, he's a Republican. I think he probably made a mistake, and, they're demonizing him for it. But I think he did have a good heart. He was just trying to make sure if you're buying a gun, you know how to use it. But the Democrats aren't doing that. Saslaw is not saying, I'm going to withdraw Senate Bill 16. Our Attorney General isn't saying, hey, I have some constitutional concerns with Senate Bill 16 myself. For instance, even in Maryland, there was not a registration requirement for the grandfather clause. Mm-hmm. When they put their grandfather clause in, it didn't require a registration of the firearm. And, so that's it. That's an issue. And our Attorney General, can't muster the courage to publicly come out and say, hey, some of these bills are going a little too far. We're going to, have some talks with these people. I can't do it. But what they're doing is they're demonizing the right, people like me, who are speaking out and saying that we are causing a panic. And, I saw a Democrat yesterday say, we're not coming after your guns. That's just not true. I mean, if you read multiple bills, they are absolutely coming after the guns. Now, whether those bills pass, but don't say you're not coming after guns when you have a forfeiture clause in Senate Bill 16. It says you have to get rid of your gun or you're going to be a felon. Don't say you're not coming after the guns if those bills are still in consideration. Withdraw those bills. Senator Saslaw, withdraw that bill. So that there's nothing on the floor right now where you are coming after us. But those bills are still there. Nobody's withdrawing them.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of attention is being paid to Senate Bill 16, the outright gun ban and the magazine ban. But, there are so many other provisions that I think do go after, if not the guns that we own, certainly our right to keep and bear arms. So whether it's the gun rationing bill, the return of one gun a month, or the universal background check bill, or the provision that, and this hasn't gotten a ton of press, but there is a provision that would bar parents from allowing their minor children, 17 years old, to have unsupervised access to a firearm. And I live in rural Virginia. I can't tell you how many, teens that my kids go to school with who are 16, 17 years old. They hunt on their family's property. They do it by themselves. They've been doing it for several years. I know as well that we've got families who allow their 16, 17-year-old children to have access to a firearm when they're home alone, because police might be 30 minutes away if somebody tries to break in. And yet these parents would become criminals if they allowed their 17-year-old daughter access to a firearm that she was trained to use and can handle responsibly for the purposes of self-defense. That is absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. Here's a talking point that I've been trying to say along the way. None of these are really gun bills, okay? None of these are really things that deal with guns at their heart. What the point is how much government do we need in our life? And that's what this is really about. How much government do we need to tell us how to do something, maybe firearms or voting or whatever they're talking about? How much government do we need? And, does a guy who lives in southwestern Virginia need the government telling his kids that have grown up with firearms their whole life how old the kid has to be? There's a difference between 16 and 17, or there's a difference between 17 and 19. It's it's just the government trying to put their thumb on people's lives. And that's really what this is. And it relates to guns in this particular conversation. But it's how much are they trying to do that? Now, maybe in an urban area, maybe somebody who doesn't have guns or hasn't grown up with guns, maybe government does need a little bit more control on certain people. But somebody in the western part of the state, and their kids have grown up with guns and shot their first gun when they were 8 years old and have been hunting with their dad, it doesn't make any sense to tell them, oh, well, you're not old enough now. The state just says you're not old enough to be able to properly handle a firearm. It's that mentality, and that's the Democrats' motto on everything. It's more government, less individual decision, and everything that's their base platform. More government, less personal decision.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm curious, we've seen the Attorney General come out and say, look, I expect that these laws are going to be complied with and they're going to be followed. It says that these Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions have no legal standing, which is, and look, they're resolutions. They're, for the most part, we've got a couple of counties that have actually established ordinances, but for the most part, we are talking about resolutions. I'm curious, though, what is your take, Tim, on what these counties specifically are doing and saying, in that, we don't plan on spending public funds to enforce unconstitutional gun laws. Sheriffs and even some Commonwealth's attorneys are now coming out and saying that they don't plan on using their office to enforce unconstitutional gun laws. Do they have the ability and the power to do that?
So we are a Dillon rule state. And what that means is that when the state passes a law, it's presumed to be a constitutional law. And the localities don't get to be the trier of fact of whether something is constitutional or not. It's the court's job. Now, that's the rule. And so when a gun law comes down, the local city or county doesn't have the authority to say that's an unconstitutional law, we're not going to enforce that. Even if it were so much as this, let's say that Virginia said slavery is legal. We're going to let you have, slaves again, starting today. Even in that situation, a locality couldn't say, well, that's unconstitutional. That clearly violates, the anti-slavery provision of the U.S. Constitution. They can't do it. It requires a court to do it. And until a court does it, the cities and counties have to, by the Dillon rule, follow whatever their master tells them to do. But it's really more of an economic thing. Let me break the math down for you.
Mm-hmm.
So 2.5 million gun owners in Virginia, and I'm going to be very conservative on the math here. 2.5 million gun owners in Virginia. Let's just say 10% have what will be considered prohibited weapons after July 1, whatever they're going to call prohibited weapons. Guns that they bought legally now they're not allowed to have unless they register or do something else. So let's say half of them comply with whatever the mandates are, getting rid of the guns or, sorry.
No, you're fine.
My phone, fell here, sorry. So, all right, so you have 2.5 million people. You have 10% have guns. that will be prohibited. So that's 250,000. Half of them will comply. So that's 125,000 people statewide that aren't going to comply. So those are going to be felons if something like Senate Bill 16 passes, right? Okay. So when you break that into jurisdictions, let's just say for a city like Suffolk, for instance, Suffolk has would have about maybe 6,000 of those felons living in their city, right? Well, what is Suffolk supposed to do? Are they supposed to go round up all 6,000 of these people and put them in jail? And if so, where would they put them? They don't have a jail big enough to hold 6,000 people anyway. I mean, their local jail doesn't hold that many people. So how are they going to do that? It costs $100 a day to put somebody in jail. It's going to cost, you're going to lose all the tax revenue from these lawful people not being able to pay taxes. So, just to the city of Suffolk, we did the math, and it is going to come out to about $250 million for the fiscal year 2019 or 2020 to 2021 for Suffolk to comply with something like Senate Bill 16. How are they going to do it? There's not enough money. The only way you could do it is say, we're not going to enforce any other laws and just come after the gun laws. And so really it's a math issue more than it is a sanctuary issue. The localities can't arrest 125,000 people in Virginia. They can't do it. There's nowhere to put them, and there's no money that would be able to support that. I did a video about they're going to kick in $100 million to the Department of Corrections next year. Mm-hmm. That's not enough. I mean, you need $250 million just in the city of Suffolk. So where's the money going to come from to be able to lock up all these people? And so you can't come into government on one election, just one election, and say 100,000 people conservatively are now felons and we have to go round them up. There's just no way to mathematically do that, even in a state like Virginia. There's not enough money. And so that's really where the truth of these things is that's really where we're going to have the most protection is the police just are too busy actually chasing down real criminals. Now, obviously, as these things are working through the courts, if an AR-15 is illegal to own, you don't want to go walking into Walmart with your AR-15. I mean, the police will have to respond. But Are they going to be able to come door to door and all that? I don't think so. Even with Congressman McEachin saying that he should activate the National Guard, there's not even enough National Guard to do that. I mean, there's just not enough people out there to be able to enforce the kind of laws that Senate Bill 16 wants to do. And that's where we really have our true backstop on this is there's not enough money to enforce the radical laws that the Democrats would like to enforce. And if that gives viewers any hope, that's where I see the protections at.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I also think, too, though, that, Democrats have actually given Republicans, conservatives, gun owners a bit of a playbook to work with. I mean, you've had the Commonwealth's attorney in, I think it was Portsmouth, that came out and said, not going to prosecute any misdemeanor marijuana arrest. A number of Commonwealth's attorneys around the state have said, listen, if somebody's arrested, we're going to, put them in a diversion program. We're not going to prosecute them. There is, it seems to me, baked into the cake for, Commonwealth's attorneys, for sheriffs, police chiefs, and rank and file officers. Every day they have to use discretion. As you say, you have to prioritize based on the limited amount of funds and the finite amount of officers that you have. You have to prioritize what laws you're really going to be paying attention to. And just as, we don't see police give out tickets for going 56 into 55, they have that level of discretion. It seems to me like, again, the left has shown us that even in a Dillon rule state, there's a lot of individual discretion that can be used by the folks in these offices.
Absolutely. Everybody hates Governor Northam. The real culprit, the real demon in our state government right now is Mark Herring. It's our Attorney General. He is by far the one person who has absolutely violated his oath of office on multiple occasions. His job of Attorney General is to enforce the laws of Virginia. Whatever those laws are, that's what his job is. He's not supposed to be able to be judge, jury, and executioner of what's right and what's wrong. Mark Herring came out in an op-ed in June this year in the Newport News Daily Press and said he's thrilled that Portsmouth and Norfolk aren't enforcing marijuana laws because he doesn't agree with them. He doesn't think that the laws should apply. Well, that's not his job. He's the Attorney General. He's supposed to be enforcing the laws. It's the legislature's job to decide what those laws are. He is supposed to enforce those laws, even if they're unconstitutional. In some way, he's supposed to be arguing for the legitimacy of why the legislature did what they chose to do. But he hasn't done that. He goes with the flow of whatever the Democrat Party says, and what he says is he did this with gay marriage as well. I'm for gay marriage. I'm not against gay marriage, but when it was illegal in Virginia, he was saying that those laws in Virginia he's not going to enforce them, and that's not his job. So what he does is he takes his political pulse and he says, this law I'm not going to follow it because I don't think it's constitutional, or this law I think needs to be changed, so I'm not going to follow it. And then the gun laws that are going to be unconstitutional, he's going to say, oh, those are good. Those are fine. And so he's the problem in the equation. If we had a true attorney general who was unbiased, in the middle, lover of the law, worships the law, not a political party, he would be out there saying, Senate Bill 16 is crazy. That shouldn't even be out there. We can have gun laws, we can do this, and this under the law, but you can't do Senate Bill 16. If we had somebody like that, it would be toning back the Democrats. It's his job to rein them in, and he's basically just saying, do whatever you want. He's the real problem with the equation, not the governor. Governor's, he's a politician, but the attorney general is supposed to be the guy protecting the law, and he's not going to do that. I don't know if you saw my video yesterday, but I talked about the churches, right?
Mm-hmm.
The tragedy in Texas yesterday. Well, we have a law in Virginia that says it's illegal to bring a gun into a church. Okay. And Ken Cuccinelli, our former attorney general, said that it would be okay to bring a gun into a church if it's for personal protection. Okay. And he opined that. Herring has never come out in support of that opinion. He's been in that office for 6 or 7 years. I mean, it's like anything that is gun related, he is going to take the position that there should be restrictions or extremes, and anything that is more social related, he's going to take a different approach of whatever the Democrats want to do. He is by far the worst, and I hope when people are mad at Governor Northam, he's a politician. What do you expect? But the attorney general is supposed to be the guy who's protecting the law, and he's not doing that in Virginia.
Talking again with Tim Anderson. So, Tim, last question. Where do you see this going? I mean, we've got the legislature coming in here in the next week or so. As you say, we haven't seen a ton of new gun control bills introduced since the backlash began. Still waiting to see the specific language for red flag provisions. We know that that's coming, but no bill is dropped yet. How many more bills do you think are on the way? And do you think that this Second Amendment sanctuary movement really is having an impact in terms of causing lawmakers to take a second look at some of these bills that they were planning on dropping?
I hope that some of the more softer Democrats are paying attention. There's the extreme Democrats that are going to go, that have no risk of not getting reelected. Okay, so we're not going to be able to reach them. But the Linwood Lewises in Accomack County, these guys that are in rural areas that are Democrats that own guns themselves, hoping that they are watching what is happening. These softer Democrats from more rural areas that aren't as anti-gun as some of the Fairfax Democrats are, right? Here's a couple of huge concerns that I have, and I hope that your platform reaches the people that I'm really wanting to talk to. Lobby Day, okay, January 20th, right? If anything goes bad on Lobby Day, it's going to be blamed on the gun owners, okay? So, we're there, and if Antifa shows up and some kind of a riot happens and somebody gets shot, it's going to be blamed on the gun owners. It's going to be looked at like, these crazy gun owner people. And so it is in nobody's best interest to be bringing Confederate flags, waving those things around at Lobby Day, having long rifles at Lobby Day. It's one of these things where we have to be calm. We have to be looked at as a calm group of people. And if it gets out of control, it's going to dramatically hurt those soft Democrats who might be on the fence. If people get shot on January 20th, we're going to lose those soft Democrats who may still be on our side. And so the VCDL has been imploring people, don't bring long guns. We don't need them there. Yes, they're yours. Yes, you have a constitutional right to have them, but national media is watching. We don't need the militia showing up in army uniforms patrolling the area like a peacekeeping force. We don't need that at this lobby day. There's Capitol Police. Let the civilian people do their jobs. And I'm hoping that the militia, I'm not trying to talk bad to the militia, okay? I appreciate what they do. But we don't need that on lobby day. And if something bad happens, we don't need, we need to be careful not to be brandishing firearms. So I'm
well, and to be perfectly honest, I suspect that by the time lobby day takes place, the Democrats will have changed the rules regarding carrying firearms at Capitol Square, and I suspect that they will make the Capitol grounds a gun-free zone.
Yeah, I think you're right. So it'll be like a mall gun-free zone, right? It's not going to be a crime to have it. So if you show up with a gun, they can escort you off the property, and then if you refuse to leave, then you can be criminally charged for trespass. So I would not say you should bring a gun, but it's not going to be. It can't make it a crime that quickly. They can make it like a mall where it's you have to leave kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I kind of hope they do it. I mean, I'm not anti-Second Amendment when I say that. I'm just concerned that something bad. I'm concerned not for the Second Amendment people, because the Second Amendment people are peaceful people. I'm concerned that there's the Antifa people that are going to be there, and they're going to cause trouble, and it's going to turn into a Charlottesville incident all over again. And it's just going to take one hot-tempered person with a gun that's going to ruin the conversation for the entire state. And so I'm hoping. So I'm concerned about that. But assuming that lobby day goes good and we don't have huge problems there, then what I think we're going to see is we're going to see moderation come down. Now, a couple days ago, I talked about what moderation may look like, and I got blasted for it by a lot of people who watch my videos as being anti-Second Amendment. Here's my point. This is all going to go to the courts, okay? The Second Amendment has all kinds of protections. There's actually a case right now in the U.S. Supreme Court called Warman versus Healy that is going to conference next month in January, that if they take the case, it could totally decide whether we're even allowed to own AR-15s and high-capacity magazines and all that. That case could decide that. And Brett Kavanaugh is a huge proponent of us being able to have those. So we know he's up there now. And so all of that can be dealt in the courts. But here's my take is that there's three things that can happen in Richmond. One, they could take no action on guns. Two, they could take a moderate action on guns. And three, they could take an extreme action on guns. They're certainly not going to do nothing, okay? So it's a question of moderation or extreme. And my point has always been as a lawyer is I would rather see moderate gun control laws coming out that we can challenge that doesn't make us felons in the process, right? And that's what I'm hoping for this time. And then until we can get to 2021, and then hopefully people will vote back in Republicans and we can undo all this mess. But I would rather see moderation coming out of Richmond than extreme. And, moderation may be maybe there's a waiting period to purchase AR-15s rather than making them illegal altogether. I'm not saying I think any of that should happen, but I would rather have a waiting period than saying you're a felon for owning. That's what I'm hoping for. And then we can challenge those. And then when we get to 2021, we can vote and hopefully take our state back.
Tim, listen, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir. It is so good talking with you, and hope we can get a chance to do this again very soon.
All right, brother. It's good seeing you. Hey, I know you're speaking at Lobby Day. Be safe, okay?
I will. Thanks very much, sir.
Right,
Tim
brother,
Anderson joining us from Virginia Law Office. All right, so look forward to talking to Tim again here soon. And, I do want to say something about a Lobby Day and generally where gun owners in Virginia need to be right now, up here and in here, in terms of what we're doing to protect and defend our right to keep and bear arms. Obviously, the Second Amendment sanctuary movement itself is incredibly important. The stance that not only gun owners are taking, but again, county sheriffs, Commonwealth's attorneys, it has been amazing to see. But we are in the middle of a persuasion campaign, as are gun control advocates right now. Right? We are trying to persuade, as Tim noted, those sort of soft Democrats, rural Democrats. Don't know how successful we'll be, but we're also trying to persuade voters. We're trying to persuade those undecideds, those people who don't pay much attention to these issues. And frankly, for a lot of those individuals, the persuasive argument is and can be effective, as long as you're actually trying to make it. If you're trying to shout these people down, if you're trying to tell everybody who doesn't agree with you that they're tyrants, that's not going to work well, right? We need to be building this coalition and expanding this coalition. And we can. We absolutely can. We can take this movement, which has been primarily in Virginia's rural and some suburban areas, and we can and we must actually bring this same message to Richmond, to Virginia Beach, to Portsmouth, to Petersburg, to Northern Virginia. And I do believe that there are arguments and facts, data points that can actually make inroads in even those blue urban areas that can erode the support for the gun control laws that are being proposed. But we've got to be able to make those arguments. In fact, I'm going to be highlighting some of those arguments in the days to come. But again, right now, I think it's absolutely important and critical that every gun owner understands when they go to Lobby Day on January 20th, and I hope we have a massive crowd. I'd love to see every gun owner in Virginia there. I know we won't get that, but I would love to see that Capitol Square just absolutely jam-packed full of Second Amendment supporters. But when we are there to persuade. We are there to change hearts and minds. We are there to lobby our lawmakers, but also to present a message to whoever might be watching around the state of Virginia that it's not just my rights that are at stake. It's the public safety of the Commonwealth, that there are far better proposals that do not infringe on the constitutional rights of anybody and actually are effective at reducing violent crime, at addressing suicide, at going after the gang violence that has plagued cities like Richmond and Petersburg for far too long. There are things that can be done. There are bills that are already being proposed that would be much more effective at improving the public safety of all Virginians that do not touch the constitutional rights of anybody. And we need to be doing our best job and making the best arguments we can to, again, persuade those folks, those undecideds, and those soft supporters of gun control. This isn't the way to go. Not only are you trampling on people's constitutional rights, but you're gonna make things worse when you have the opportunity to make things better. All right, now listen, coming up on tomorrow's program, we're going to talk with Chuck Rossi. Spent a number of years at Facebook, and Chuck actually had a piece at Open Source Defense. I wrote about it before Christmas on the new rules for Second Amendment influencers on Facebook and Instagram. We're going to talk about navigating these muddy waters here when it comes to being a Second Amendment activist online. And the best way to go about doing this. I think the bottom line for Chuck is stay engaged, but we're going to find out what that means and how we can best do that on tomorrow's Bearing Arms Cam and Company. We will be off on January 1st, but that's the only day off this week. We'll be back on the 2nd and 3rd. And of course, New Year's Eve, tomorrow, Tuesday, Chuck Rossi joins us from Open Source Defense. Thanks for tuning in today. Have yourself, I won't say a Merry Little Christmas because that already happened. I won't say Happy New Year because I'll talk to you before then. So I guess have yourself as good a Monday as you can possibly have. I appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget you can subscribe to Bearing Arms Cam and Company at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page. Also, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube. That way you never miss a program. Thank you as always for sharing Bearing Arms Cam and Company as well. I got to tell you, the word is really getting out about this program and what we're doing each and every day, and I thank you for that. Have yourself, again, as good a Monday as you can possibly have, and we'll see you tomorrow with another brand new edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company.